In our modern world, things often feel more divisive than ever, from explosive rhetoric designed to provoke outrage to networks of online disinformation campaigns deliberately stoking harmful divisions. We're witnessing a weaponization of one of humanity's ugliest emotions: hatred. Most of us think we understand it in broad strokes, an intense dislike or rage towards a person or group. Yet, hatred is something far more complex and enduring than ordinary anger, which tends to flare up in reaction to an immediate event or occurrence. Hatred does not always require direct contact or a specific trigger. It lingers and shapes the way we interpret new experiences. To hate someone or something is to wish the worst for them, to actively root for their downfall, and to experience satisfaction when misfortune strikes them. This makes hatred an emotional response that must be taken seriously, not only because of its immediate impact, but also because of its deep historical and evolutionary roots. In prehistoric times, hatred likely evolved as an adaptive response. For early humans, survival often depended on being able to identify and respond to threats decisively. Hatred really wasn't an everyday occurrence. It was reserved for enemies that posed an ongoing danger, wild animals that threatened the community's food supply, and rival tribes competing for scarce resources. In such cases, hatred functioned as a psychological switch, overriding empathy and cooperation in favor of aggression and defense. Take, for example, domesticated animals, like wolves, which were once predators, eventually became our allies as dogs, while large animals like cattle and horses, although useful, still presented risks. Hatred may have played a role in allowing early humans to suppress their natural hesitation and act decisively against dangerous animals or rival groups. Hatred made violence against one's own species psychologically easier, which in turn made tribal warfare far more sustainable. But nature is not perfect. The evolutionary mechanism that once kept early humans safe now operates in contexts where it often causes more harm than good. Unlike fear, which fades once danger passes, hatred can persist long past its rational purpose, far beyond the point of necessity. From genocides and oppressive regimes to workplace rivalries and neighborhood feuds, hatred has proven itself to be a remarkably durable and adaptable human flaw. This means it can be sustained, justified, and even ritualized through stories, ideologies, and beliefs. It is a learned behavior that can be reinforced over time. This neurological dimension is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it explains why hatred can be so enduring, because it intertwines with our capacity for abstract thought. On the other hand, it also means hatred be dismantled through conscious effort, re-education, and exposure to alternative narratives. Because hatred is such a powerful force, it has long been exploited by leaders and propagandists. The formula is disturbingly simple. First, unite a group around a shared grievance. This grievance must be universal and relatable, such as rising food costs, declining job security, or limited access to healthcare. Once the grievance is established, blame must be placed to an outgroup. In ancient times, with limited communication, this was often a neighboring village or tribe. In modern times, the targets are more likely to be minority populations, immigrants, or rival nations. Leaders know that hatred is not appealing on its own. Few people want to think of themselves as hateful. Instead, hatred is framed as justified defense against a supposed threat. Negative interactions, whether real, exaggerated, or fabricated, are highlighted to confirm the group's suspicions. Over time, isolated events are generalized to entire populations. Consider the example of outsourcing. Many call centers, both legitimate and fraudulent, are based in India. At the same time, jobs in wealthier nations have been relocated to countries like India. These overlapping realities create fertile ground for resentment. Without deeper context, individuals may come to associate all negative customer service experiences or job insecurity with Indian workers as a group. This narrow and unfair generalization becomes a seed of prejudice, and if nurtured, it can grow into outright hatred. Interestingly, groups formed primarily around hatred often splinter and collapse. This is because hatred, unlike shared values or goals, is not a stable foundation for unity. Members may initially unite against an external enemy, but over time, internal differences and new grievances arise. Hatred begets more hatred, and it eventually turns inward. Even within nations or ethnic groups, historical grievances can persist for generations, with communities locked in cycles of resentment that weaken collective stability. If hatred is learned, it can also be unlearned. Deprogramming begins with exposure. Large, diverse cities often lean progressive, not necessarily because of ideology, but because of lived experience. When individuals interact with people from different backgrounds in daily life, Whether on public transportation, at work, or in schools, they are forced to see others as individuals rather than abstract enemies. Hatred thrives in isolation, but diminishes in human contact. Education is another powerful tool. Studying the history, culture, and perspectives of outgroups not only expands our knowledge but also undermines the simplistic narratives that hatred depends on. Most cultural practices, when understood in context, reveal motivations and challenges not so different from our own. Hatred frames others as alien and incomprehensible. Education reframes them as a human and relatable. Perhaps most importantly, overcoming hatred requires moral humility. Hatred often flourishes alongside moral grandstanding, the belief that one's group is inherently superior. By acknowledging differences without assuming superiority, individuals open themselves to understanding. This does not mean endorsing harmful practices, but it does mean recognizing that cultural norms vary and that the actions of individuals cannot always be generalized to entire population. The final stage of dismantling hatred is not neutrality, but acceptance. It is not enough to simply stop hating. Individuals and societies must actively cultivate positive associations with those they once mistrusted. This can be achieved through dialogue, cooperation, and conscious effort to replace negative feedback loops. Hatred may be deeply wired, but empathy and cooperation are equally natural human capacities. By choosing to strengthen these, humanity can gradually weaken the power of hatred. It is one of our oldest survival tools, but it has outlived much of its usefulness. Once necessary for dealing with predators, it now lingers as a destructive flaw. But hatred is not inevitable. Because it is rooted in higher reasoning, it can be dismantled by higher reasoning. Through exposure, education, humility, and dialogue. The task is not easy. Hatred feels powerful, seductive, and sometimes even righteous. But left unchecked, it destroys both its targets and its hosts. The real challenge of the modern world is not just to stop hatred, but to transform it into something more constructive. Understanding empathy and solidarity, only then can humanity move beyond cycles of division and build a society where cooperation outweighs hostility. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.